More than 100 students were arrested at Columbia University Thursday in defiance of its longstanding tradition of protest. The students had set up encampments on Columbia's campus to voice their anger and dissent over the war in Israel. The arrest came a day after the president of Columbia, Nifat Shafik, testified before Congress on anti-Semitism on campus. Shafik asked for help from the NYPD to clear the encampment on the grounds that, quote, the encampment and related disruptions pose a clear and present danger to the school. Israel-Hamas, daughter of Congresswoman ILHAN OMAR, a Democrat from Minnesota and vocal supporter of Palestinian causes, said she was suspended after taking part in protests. She posted on X, I'm an organizer with CU Apartheid Divest, Columbia SJP. In my 3 years at Barnard College, I have never been reprimanded or received any disciplinary warnings. I just received notice that I am one of 3 students suspended for standing in solidarity with Palestinians facing a genocide.
The student-run newspaper, the Columbia Spectator, reported that over 100 individuals were arrested at the, quote, Gaza Solidarity encampment beginning around 1 p.m. Thursday, a day after the president promised Congress to do better when it comes to addressing anti-Semitism on campus. So I don't know if that had any impact on the president of the university after talking to, Congress about anti-Semitism on campus. But again, this runs into the same problem we've seen time and again, that speaking out about the brutality that Palestinians are experiencing by the hands of the IDF is not anti-Semitism, that criticizing Israel and the Netanyahu regime and the actions of the IDF is not making a large statement about the Jewish people as a whole. And so I really think we're at this point in time where we're going to need to grapple with that, because equating those two things is a very, dangerous, slippery slope of not allowing free speech on campus when it comes to people speaking out against atrocities that the rest of the world has stood in Palestine over. The United Nations, had the United States be the only voting against recognizing Palestine as a state. So, in recent months, we've seen a lot of attention to this issue, more than I think universities have seen in the past. But when it comes to, this kind of rally where you had presidential candidates speaking there, Cornel West was there, speaking to a crowd of people. This is a political moment that I don't think the university really has business pursuing disciplinary action over. Israel-Hamas didn't do anything violent, didn't have a record of being disruptive on campus. Also, this comes after you have ILHAN OMAR making remarks on the floor of Congress. So is this some kind of retaliation against her mother's action? It really opens up a lot of questions.
I definitely agree with you that a lot of times criticism of Israel is conflated with anti-Semitism. We've talked about that on this program a lot. There are instances that happen at Columbia that I think absolutely cross the line into being actually anti-Semitic. There's video of some of the protesters screaming, never forget the 7th of October. That will happen not one more time, not 5 more times, not 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. The 7th of October is going to be every day for you. They were calling Jewish people Nazis. One student testified in front of Congress talking about the fact that she's supposed to take a Middle East Studies program, but the professor who teaches the class is the one who described October 7th as stunning, astonishing, awesome, jubilant, and an achievement. There was an Israeli journalist who was assaulted at one of the protests. Other Jewish students described months of harassment. There's people on video saying, long live Hamas and kill all Zionists, shouting in Jewish people's faces. So it does seem like there's a lot of behavior at this particular protest that absolutely does cross the line into anti-Semitism and should be addressed. And I think the other complicating factor here in terms of the disciplinary action that was taken against the protesters is that they did expressly violate the campus policies on organizing. And Columbia is a private university. They, of course, have the right to make decisions about where and when students are allowed to organize. And if you break those rules, you basically sign up for potentially getting arrested and being taken to jail. That's just a reality of civil disobedience. And when you are protesting in a way that violates campus policies, that's a risk that you take and that you sign up for and you have to be prepared for. A lot of the students who were arrested are seen on camera immediately after sort of laughing because they assume nothing's really going to happen to them. And then when they find out actually they're suspended and might be expelled, they end up being turning quite upset, which is reasonable. Obviously, getting expelled from college is not great, especially when you pay a lot of money to go to school there. But it's something that I think you have to grapple with before you actively decide to break campus policy. It looks like the Columbia president, according to this statement that went out, offered these students multiple opportunities to come in and have a conversation with the administration officials, and they declined to do so and instead set up this encampment right outside of the library, dorm buildings, classrooms, just 10 days ahead of final season. And so they did end up disrupting the ability of the other students who are paying just as much money as them to be on campus from getting an education and doing what they went there to do, which is not to be activists, but to graduate and make sure that they're learning something through their classes. So there has to be this balance on campus, I think, between allowing protest and allowing students to have their voices heard, while also making sure that the majority of these 8,000 undergrads outside of the 100 who were camping on this lawn from being able to access the services that they're paying for as well.
Right, yeah. We're almost getting into the territory of is a person's right to protest being jeopardized by the way RICO prosecutions have gone in the United States and the way that almost all land has been privatized in the United States. And, whoever owns that land gets to dictate the behavior of those on that land. At some point, we've lost our right to protest when the laws are going in the direction that they're going. And this is one of the fundamental rights, regarding free speech in our country. And I think it's about time that, when students are members of a campus and they have a particular political opinion about a huge, not even conflict, but genocide in the world, and they want space to discuss it, to talk about it. And you have professors in Columbia University, documented occasions, retaliating against students who are pro-Palestine. This was in the social work school at Columbia University, graduate students. I, tweeted out a story with all of the documentation of the retaliation that graduate students there were experiencing from the professor. And to mention the October 7th chant, it wasn't, a chant made by protesters. This was one student filmed in New York City, not confirmed to actually be a student of Columbia University. It's a young person, near the police. It was posted by, Eaton Fishberger on Twitter from behind. So we don't even know whose mouth these words are coming from. If this is the real audio, it's very unconfirmed. The general theme of the protest was to be in solidarity with the people of Gaza who are experiencing a famine, with over 30,000 people killed by the IDF, and at a time when the conflict is really being intensified with additional strikes made on Syria, on Iran, and in Iraq. And so I think a lot of these students are protesting for peace. Those of them that are saying, yes, October 7th was important because it was people fighting for freedom, that didn't seem to be present in any of the speeches in Columbia. If anything, it's, this one person who's a young person, not confirmed to be a student, caught nearby in New York City, unconfirmed if that's the real audio. So I think this is a moment where, again, it reminds me of the Vietnam War, where you have students protesting on college campuses for peace. Yes, risking arrest is a part of this, but I think it would be a mistake on behalf of Columbia University, not just now in the spirit of free speech, but in the long term, to suspend and punish students over expressing what they've tried to condemn on campus and other avenues.
Yeah, I think the one sticking point for me is just the fact that this is taking place in an area that is extremely disruptive and inconvenient for the other students on campus. And I understand protests are not supposed to be convenient, right? That's part of the point, is you want to make other people uncomfortable to try to spark some kind of policy change. But it kind of reminds me of the protests where people were gluing their hands to the road or to concrete barrels and preventing people from getting across bridges. This is obviously a less serious form of that, because when you block roadways, you actually block the ability for people to access emergency services, for people who are having medical emergencies, et cetera, or who have, very important engagements they have to get to, people who have to go to work in order to pay their rent. It's something that certainly doesn't win people over to your side. I can imagine that the 7,800 other students on campus who are walking past this every day and seeing this outside influence, as you brought up, if some of these people who are saying these awful things are not Columbia students, it speaks to the unruliness of the protests that they've had these outside agitators come in and be able to usurp what they're doing. That's an additional problem. And So, I mean, I think there's ways to protest that make it possible that the university can still run as its basic function, which is to provide an education to students and allow people to express their personal opinions in the meantime. I know we're going to continue to follow this and see if any other students get arrested or suspended, but we will be back with more Rising after this.